9 July 1940. The Ionian Sea, somewhere off the toe of Calabria. The water is glass flat under a punishing midday sun, and on the bridge of His Majesty's ship, Warspite, a battleship already 25 years old, Admiral Sir Andrew Cunningham watches grey shapes resolve out of the heat haze. Through his binoculars, he can just make out the silhouette of the Italian battleship Giulio Cesare, accompanied by her sister Conte di Cavour, screened by a swarm of cruisers and destroyers throwing up smoke. The range is enormous, 26,000 yards, almost 15 miles. At this distance, the enemy ship is barely a speck, a smudge of grey on a shimmering horizon, and any rational gunnery officer would tell you that hitting it is closer to fantasy than tactics. Warspite's forward turrets traverse with a low mechanical groan, 15-inch guns each weighing more than 100 tons, elevating towards the sky as if aiming for the sun itself rather than another ship. Then at 12:26 in the afternoon, with a thunderclap that rolls across the water and a recoil that rocks the entire 32,000-ton hull, Warspite fires 6 shells, each one as heavy as a small car, arc upward in a parabola that will carry them more than 2.5 kilometres into the sky before they begin their long fall back to Earth. For nearly a minute, nobody on either side knows where they will land. Then, far across the water, a column of smoke and flame erupts from the deck of Giulio Cesare. A single shell, fired from a range that no gunnery manual had ever promised would work, has found its mark. It is by any measure one of the most improbable strikes in the history of naval warfare, and to understand why it mattered, you need to understand just how badly the Royal Navy needed it to happen. By the summer of 1940, Britain's position in the Mediterranean had become precarious in a way that strategists in London found genuinely alarming. France had collapsed in June, removing the Mediterranean's second-largest Allied fleet from the equation almost overnight. Italy had declared war on the 10th of that month, bringing the Regia Marina, a modern and numerically formidable navy, into direct opposition with British forces that were suddenly fighting alone in a sea that touched 3 continents. The Italian fleet on paper looked dangerous. It possessed 6 battleships either in service or nearing completion, fast modern cruisers, and a geographic advantage that meant every Italian vessel could reach almost any point in the central Mediterranean within a day or two, while British reinforcements had to sail around the entire continent of Africa to arrive. Malta, the tiny island fortress that Britain depended on as a base for more submarines and aircraft, sat barely 60 miles from Sicily, well within range of Italian bombers, and was being pounded with regularity. Cunningham's Mediterranean fleet, based at Alexandria in Egypt, numbered just 3 battleships, a handful of cruisers, and a single aircraft carrier, HMS Eagle, whose air group was a fraction the size of what the Italians could theoretically muster from shore bases. The problem was not simply one of numbers, though the numbers were worrying enough. It was a problem of doctrine and technology. Naval gunnery in 1940 remained, despite decades of refinement since the First World War, an exercise in extraordinary difficulty once ranges extended beyond roughly 20,000 yards. Fire control systems depended on optical rangefinders, mechanical calculators, and a chain of human observation and correction that grew exponentially less reliable the further away the target sat. A shell fired from 15 miles would spend the better part of a minute in flight, during which the target ship, the firing ship, wind, sea swell, and even the rotation of the Earth itself would all conspire to throw the calculation off. The accepted wisdom among naval professionals on both sides was that engagements at such extreme range were essentially a waste of ammunition, fired more for psychological effect than any realistic hope of striking the enemy. Italian battleships, in particular, were known for excellent optics and capable design, with the Giulio Cesare class having recently been modernised with new propulsion and additional armour, making them formidable opponents in any conventional engagement at sensible fighting ranges. If Cunningham's fleet, smaller and stretched thin across an entire theatre, was forced into a slow, grinding battle of attrition at close or medium range against a numerically superior enemy operating from nearby bases with full logistical support, the arithmetic of the war in the Mediterranean would tilt dangerously against Britain within months. Something had to change the equation, and it would not be a new ship or a new weapon. It would be a 15-inch gun, an ageing battleship, and a degree of gunnery skill that very few in either navy believed was achievable. HMS Warspite herself was no secret weapon. Laid down at Devonport Dockyard in 1912 and commissioned in 1915, she was a Queen Elizabeth-class battleship that had fought at Jutland during the Great War and absorbed punishment that would have sunk a lesser-built vessel. She had been extensively modernised during the 1930s, receiving new boilers, improved armour over her decks, and crucially, refined fire control equipment, though nothing that fundamentally altered the basic physics of long-range naval gunnery. Her main armament consisted of 4 twin turrets, 8 15-inch guns in total, each barrel roughly 18 metres long and capable of hurling an armour-piercing shell weighing some 870 kilograms, comparable to the mass of a small family car, across distances that would have seemed absurd to the gun's original designers. The fire control system aboard Warspite relied on a director positioned high in the superstructure, feeding data down to a mechanical computing table below decks known as the Admiralty Fire Control Table, a marvel of brass, gears, and clockwork precision that calculated the necessary gun elevation and bearing based on the relative speed, course, and range of targets and firing ship. It was, in essence, an analogue computer the size of a large desk, built by engineers at Vickers and Elswick, who had spent careers refining a craft that blended mathematics with mechanical artistry. None of this equipment was secret or unique to Warspite. What made the difference that afternoon off Calabria was the quality of observation, the calm of the gunnery officers under pressure, and crucially, a spotter aircraft from HMS Eagle that had been tracking the Italian fleet and feeding range corrections back to Cunningham's flagship in the minutes before the engagement began. When Warspite's guns fired that 6-gun salvo, the shells travelled in a flight time of approximately 40 seconds, rising to an altitude of well over 2,000 metres before plunging down almost vertically onto their target, striking with a force that turned imprecise, long-range gunnery into something approaching a demonstration of naval artillery as a precision discipline rather than an exercise in hope. If you wanted an everyday comparison, imagine throwing a dart from one end of a football pitch and not merely hitting the board at the other end, but landing in the bullseye, except the dart weighs as much as a saloon car and the distance is roughly 15 miles rather than 20 feet. The manufacturing chain behind that single shell stretched across the length of Britain. The 15-inch guns themselves were produced at Elswick on the River Tyne and at the Royal Gun Factory in Woolwich, forged from high-tensile steel in barrels built up from successive tubes, shrunk one over another under enormous heat and pressure, a process that took weeks for each individual gun and demanded tolerances measured in fractions of a millimetre across components several metres long. The armour-piercing shells themselves were manufactured separately, often at facilities in Sheffield, where specialist steel foundries had decades of experience producing the hardened noses needed to punch through warship armour without shattering on impact, a problem that had plagued earlier generations of naval ammunition. Propellant charges, made from cordite, were produced at government factories, including those at Ardea in Scotland, packed into silk bags that would be entirely consumed in the explosion, leaving no debris to jam the breech for the next firing. Exact wartime production figures for 15-inch ammunition remain difficult to state with precision, since much of the relevant Admiralty documentation was either not preserved in detail or remained scattered across archives never fully consolidated for public record. But contemporary estimates suggest several 100,000 rounds of various calibers were produced for the Royal Navy's battleship fleet across the war as a whole. Loading and firing the guns required a disciplined choreography below decks, with shell rooms and magazines kept rigorously separated for safety, hydraulic hoists carrying each shell and charge up through armoured trunks to the turret, where teams of sailors working in cramped, hot conditions rammed the projectile home before the charge followed and the massive breech swung shut, with a sound described by veterans as comparable to a large industrial door slamming under pressure. The single shell that struck Giulio Cesare hit her aft, near one of her funnels, and though it did not sink the Italian battleship, the damage was sufficient to force a reduction in speed and, more importantly, to convince the Italian commander, Admiral Inigo Campioni, that continuing the engagement carried unacceptable risk. If you're enjoying this story so far, a quick subscribe really does help the channel keep producing videos like this one. Giulio Cesare turned away under cover of smoke laid by accompanying destroyers, and the rest of the Italian fleet followed her lead, breaking off what had briefly threatened to become a major fleet action. British cruisers and destroyers continued a running engagement for a short period afterward. But without the main battleship targets willing to commit to a decisive clash, the Battle of Calabria effectively ended there, inconclusive in terms of ships sunk, but enormously significant in terms of what it demonstrated. Documentation on the precise extent of damage to Giulio Cesare remains somewhat limited, drawn largely from British and Italian after-action reports rather than detailed technical surveys, and accounts of exact casualty figures from the strike vary depending on the source consulted, but the broader strategic outcome is not in dispute. An Italian battleship, part of a fleet that significantly outnumbered the British force present that day, had been struck and damaged at a range that no other ship's gunners had reliably achieved in the history of naval combat. With one comparable instance from barely a month earlier, when the German battlecruiser Scharnhorst struck the British carrier Glorious off Norway at a similar extreme range. It is worth pausing on that comparison because the Scharnhorst Glorious engagement and the Warspite Giulio Cesare engagement are frequently cited together as the two recorded instances of ships successfully hitting one another at roughly 24 kilometres or 15 miles, making Warspite's achievement remarkable rather than entirely without precedent, though the circumstances differed substantially. Scharnhorst had engaged a lightly armoured aircraft carrier that was not designed for surface combat and was caught essentially unprepared, whereas Warspite struck a purpose-built battleship that was manoeuvring as part of an organised fleet action, screened by smoke, escorts and the general chaos of a contested engagement. German naval gunnery throughout the war was technically excellent, and the Kriegsmarine's optical range-finding equipment, produced by firms such as Zeiss, was arguably superior in pure engineering terms to British equivalents. Yet the Royal Navy's combination of fire control doctrine, aerial spotting, and crew proficiency at Calabria produced a result against a genuinely capable opponent operating in formation rather than caught alone. On the American side, comparable long-range gunnery successes did not occur until much later in the Pacific War, where engagements such as the Surigao Strait action in 1944 demonstrated radar-directed fire control, achieving hits at substantial range. But by then the technology had shifted decisively from optical and mechanical systems toward radar, representing an entirely different generation of fire control, rather than a direct continuation of what Warspite's crew achieved using essentially analog, optically guided methods. American battleship doctrine, in the opening years of the war, prior to widespread radar deployment, generally assumed that effective gunnery beyond roughly 20,000 yards remained unreliable, an assumption broadly shared across the United States Navy's pre-war training establishments, and one that Calabria had already begun to quietly challenge years before American battleships entered combat in significant numbers. The Italian Navy, for its part, never replicated a comparable hit against British forces at anything approaching that range for the remainder of the Mediterranean campaign, and Italian commanders grew notably more cautious about engaging British battleships at long range following Calabria, a hesitancy that shaped Italian naval strategy for the rest of the war. Some historians have suggested that this caution, more than any single subsequent defeat, explains why the Regia Marina, despite its considerable strength on paper, never managed to translate that strength into a decisive battle that might have altered the course of the Mediterranean campaign. The legacy of that single shell extends well beyond the immediate tactical outcome of one indecisive battle. Psychologically, the hit reinforced a perception, already taking root within both fleets, that British battleship gunnery, despite operating older ships and often outdated equipment compared with newer Italian and German designs, remained dangerously effective at extreme ranges that theoretically favoured nobody. This reputation arguably influenced Italian naval caution throughout the following years of the Mediterranean campaign, contributing to a broader pattern in which the Regia Marina, despite possessing modern, fast and numerically superior forces for much of the war, rarely committed to decisive surface action against the Royal Navy, preferring instead to preserve its fleet rather than risk it in engagements where British gunnery might once again produce an improbable result. Materially, the damage inflicted on Giulio Cesare was relatively modest in the broader context of the war, and the ship would return to service, eventually surviving the conflict to be transferred to the Soviet Union as war reparations. But the strategic and psychological dividend paid by that one shell arguably exceeded what most naval engagements involving multiple ships sunk could claim to achieve. Warspite herself went on to a remarkable war, supporting the evacuation of British forces at Crete, bombarding German positions at Salerno and Normandy, and surviving a direct hit from a German-guided bomb off Salerno in 1943 that would have sunk many other ships outright. She earned more battle honours than almost any other vessel in the Royal Navy's long history, a distinction that began, in the public imagination at least, with that single, improbable strike off Calabria. Today, no part of Warspite survives for visitors to walk through, as she was sold for scrap in 1947 after running aground en route to the breakers, a strangely undignified end for a ship nicknamed the Grand Old Lady of the Fleet, though models, photographs and her gunnery records remain held by the National Maritime Museum and other British naval archives, preserving the technical detail of an achievement that gunnery officers still study as a case study in fire control under extreme conditions. Return for a moment to that bridge, to Cunningham, watching through his binoculars as a smudge of smoke and flame rises from a ship 15 miles distant, a ship that should, by every reasonable calculation of range, optics and probability, have been untouchable. Naval gunnery manuals of the period did not promise hits at such distance. Engineers who built the Admiralty fire control table did not design it with confidence that it would be tested successfully under genuine combat conditions at the very edge of its theoretical capability. And yet, on the 9th of July 1940, in a sea that Britain could not afford to lose, and against a fleet that should have held every advantage of numbers, geography, and fresh equipment, an ageing battleship built before the previous war proved that the impossible shot was, on this single occasion, entirely possible. The shell that struck Giulio Cesare did not sink her. It did not end the Battle of Calabria in a clear-cut British victory, and it did not eliminate the Italian threat in the Mediterranean. What it did was something arguably more valuable to a fleet stretched thin and facing an uncertain future. It planted doubt in the minds of Italian commanders about whether any range, however extreme, might prove safe from British guns. Doubt that would shape Italian naval caution for years afterward, contributing to a pattern of avoidance that allowed Cunningham's outnumbered fleet to operate with an authority its raw numbers did not strictly justify. No navy, in the more than 8 decades since, has matched that specific combination of range, target, and outcome under comparable combat conditions. Not because the feat is impossible to repeat in isolation, but because the entire era of optical range-finding, mechanical fire control tables, and battleship gunnery that made it possible has itself passed into history, replaced first by radar-guided fire, and ultimately by guided missiles that have rendered the extreme-range gun duel an artifact of a vanished age. The battleship itself as a class of warship would not long outlive the war that made Warspite famous, with aircraft carriers and later guided missiles assuming the role that big naval guns had occupied for the better part of a century, meaning that Calabria stands not merely as an exceptional moment within the era of battleship gunnery, but very nearly as its closing statement, a final demonstration of just how far optical and mechanical fire control could be pushed before the entire discipline was rendered obsolete by newer technology. Warspite fired that salvo not knowing if it would find its mark. The crew below decks, feeding shells into the breech of guns built for a war fought a generation earlier, had no certainty that their effort would matter at all against a target so distant it was barely visible to the naked eye. They fired anyway, because that is what the moment demanded, and across 15 miles of flat, sun-scorched sea, the impossible happened. A single shell, an ageing ship, and a fleet that refused to be outmatched by mere numbers. That is the story of Warspite at Calabria, and it remains to this day one of the most extraordinary feats of marksmanship the sea has ever witnessed.